Hello, everyone, wherever in the world you are watching us today, and welcome to another LPI LinkedIn Live Fireside Chat. Today, I am super excited because we are going to be discussing the skills revolution and specifically, big question, why lifelong learning is now everybody's business. Lifelong learning, as you will all know, has become a global and organizational imperative. So from artificial intelligence to automation to shifting workforce expectations, this pace of change is demanding a new mindset, and that mindset is lifelong learning as a shared responsibility. So in the next 50 minutes or so, we're going to be exploring how organizations, educators, and individuals can work together to upskill the world and create that golden chalice, if you like, culture of continuous learning. So this isn't just a conversation about training, it's actually about transformation. We're going to discuss how forward-thinking organizations are reimagining learning strategies, but also how individuals can own their development journeys. Critically, we're going to be looking at why upskilling, as I say, has become everybody's business. So don't forget to place your questions and comments in the chat, which will be moderated by the fantastic team at the LPI. But first of all, please allow me to introduce you to our fantastic guest for today, Louise Scott-Worrall. Hi, Louise. I'm going to say a little bit about you and then we'll come straight to you, if that's all right. So Louise is a partner and head of learning services for KPMG in the UK, but she's also the global solution lead for learning and works with organizations across the public sector, financial services and corporates, both in the UK and internationally. So a massive role. She has a career that spans education, healthcare and consulting and is bringing a unique blend of strategic insight and hands-on experience. I read that as we can ask her anything we want. So she understands how adults learn best and how to make learning stick to drive meaningful change. And at KPMG right now, she's passionate about helping organizations to upskill and reskill talent to ensure the workforce is fit for the future. It's about having the right people with the right skills in the right place at the right time. So welcome, Louise.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks everybody for joining.
How are you doing today? Whereabouts are you, Louise, in the world?
So I'm in Leeds today, in our Leeds office. It's the hub of our UK learning services business, so I'm often here.
Superb. And are there any leaves on the trees at the moment, is my big question to you.
There are still a few. It's still looking beautiful, but very wet today. Very wet indeed, Leeds.
We're clinging on, aren't we, I think, at the moment, clinging on to autumn. So let's start by getting everybody engaged if we can. As I say, put your comments and questions in the chat. And a quick question for you all that I'd like you to answer in the comments. Who is driving skills growth in your world? Is it you? Is it your company? Or is it both? So pop that in chat and we'll maybe come back to that shortly. Louise, I'm going to start with the big question. We like to do that here on the LPI's Fireside Chats rather than ease you into it. What do you think is actually driving this skills revolution? Because to my mind, as CEO of the LPI, skills is a word that was creeping up maybe 5 or 6 years ago as an agenda. Now, you know, we have Skills England, pretty prominent organization. And skills seems to be what people are talking about as well as capabilities, rather than qualifications and certifications. So what's driving this? Is it AI? Is it automation, changing industries, demographic shifts? Tell us what your view is, please.
Yeah, so I think skills, as you say, Ed, has become the new kind of word for whether it's competency or capability. And I think it's become evident because lots of people are talking about there being a skills gap. So obviously, you know, we're in kind of what is likely to be cited in history as the fourth industrial revolution with AI, automation, digital skills. So lots of people are talking about a skills gap. And lots of people are also trying to work out how we can improve productivity. So I think that is kind of the nuance of why it's changed, because it's just become kind of more to the fore.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We're already seeing people in chat saying that it's both, you know, mainly it's both that are who's driving skills growth in their worlds. And somebody's obviously it's very appropriate, Louise, that you're here for them, because they're in the middle of working on creating learning culture in their own organization. So I hope that they can access the recording of this and take a look at it later. It is interesting, isn't it, how AI seems to be altering this skills revolution. I think, would you agree there's a gap between knowledge and wisdom at the moment? It seems a bit dangerous the way we can access these answers to questions, but we might not have the context. How does that fit in with the skills agenda?
Yeah, so actually, I think, Giles, I've got some stats that we've conducted a global research into AI attitudes, and we absolutely found that there was this disconnect between people, how they're using AI. So just generally, one of the interesting emerging trends that came up is that actually the UK, given that we're in the UK today, is in the bottom third of people who are using AI and kind of doing the training and using AI as much. Interestingly, it's actually the emerging economies that are, organizations, countries like India, that are using kind of 90% of people are using AI daily. But are they using it competently? That's the thing. So probably not. And we also know that a quarter of people in the UK say they haven't had any AI educational training. So if they're using it without the training, then that actually might be tricky. And there's definitely something, as you say, about using AI and thinking about actually interpreting results that they get. I always used to say, you need to have a rough idea of what you're going to get out of AI or out of any kind of computer program to know whether you've got the answer right.
Yeah, so it's on the user to understand, I guess, the context first, isn't it, as well? But I'm also seeing, I mean, the LPI's analysis, we can keep that on screen, actually, this graphic, because it's really useful and people might want to, make a note of this as well. Is this publicly available, Louise? Can people?
It is.
Okay.
So I can share with you the report. So all of these reports here are publicly available. So on the left, it's our global CEO survey, where CEOs are talking about workforce AI readiness, and 77% of CEOs actually say that workforce and AI readiness and upskilling is something that's going to impact their prosperity over the next 3 years. And that's obviously going to give a competitive position as well. So if you've got a limited talent pool, then 70% of leaders are agreeing that a lack of AI talent is constraining their organization's success. But boardrooms are very active already. So 79% of global CEOs said AI has already made them rethink how they train and how they develop employees. And really interestingly, 71% of those CEOs said they are retaining and retraining high potential talent. And 61% said they're actually actively hiring new talent of people who have got broader AI technology skills. So I think actually when we were at one of the LPI events, you were saying, AI won't take your job, but somebody who knows how to use AI will. And that's kind of what this global CEO survey is actually showing us. And then sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's very accurate. Yeah, I can't take the credit for that quote though, Louise. I think it's probably appropriated from some major thought leader, but it is very interesting what you're saying on the AI piece. If I can cut in there, because I think the CEO of Google DeepMind a few weeks ago, and I think it went pretty viral, said that coding was no longer the #1 skill for young people making their way into work. In fact, it was learning how to learn that he saw as the most important skill. So where do you're doing this incredibly important role in KPMG, a global role. Would you agree with that assertion, or would you contest it? How does it fit with what we're seeing on the data here?
Absolutely. And and it was actually back in 2018. So we all think of pre and post COVID, don't we? So pre-COVID, there was in the UK an AI all-party committee on AI looking at exactly that. And the report that came out, and one of my predecessors, Robert Bolton, chaired the report, said that learning to learn was actually the key capability that anybody needed to have. So that ability to be very self-aware actually, and to know your strengths as an individual, but also at an enterprise level, kind of know what your skills, capabilities and competencies are, and therefore know how you can kind of bridge that gap, and how you therefore align strategically your budget or your focus of attention on reskilling. And not just reskilling people for today, but also really having a think about what do they need to do in the future, and a future where technology is kind of driving change faster than certainly in my career lifetime.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so a couple of points on that. One made by Emily in chat. The first one I would say, yeah, a quote that I use quite a lot, Louise. The Economist described lifelong learning as an economic imperative 5 years ago. So I'd love to know what you thought was the real cost of this skills gap to businesses. And linked to that is Emily Peterson's question in chat. She was at the CIPD conference last week, which I think was in Manchester. And there was a session saying that most companies, less than 5,000 employees, wouldn't become most productive as a result of AI until at least 2030. And do you agree with that? I'm going to be really cheeky and offer my view of that. I don't agree at all. I think it's just going to be continuous growth. 2031 will be better than 2030. 2032 will be better than 2031. We are constantly evolving in our use of this. So what is the real cost of the skills gap? And do you think organizations will peak at 2030?
So I'm probably, this would be a personal view, I'm like you, I think there are lots of organisations that have less than 5,000 employees who are already using AI to be productive. Again, back to the point of, are they using it competently? So there's a big question there. They need to make sure they've got the skills to check themselves. But in terms of then kind of the point you made about the economic imperative, so we know, and particularly the UK, that the UK struggled with lower productivity since the global financial crisis. We've had slower growth than comparable European economies such as France and Germany. And, you know, organisations like the Institute for Fiscal Studies and the Office for National Statistics are estimating, certainly last year, that the UK skills gap is costing us about 30 to 39 billion annually in kind of immediate economic issues. And the CBI predicts that could actually increase. And actually, Emily, they're saying by 2030 to 120 billion if that's not addressed. So I'm actually thinking, if you think about the number of enterprises that have less than 5,000, you know, that is an enormous amount of organisations. If they don't increase, if they wait until 2030, I'm sorry, all my lights have gone off. Best laid plans in the room.
We can still see, yeah.
So they probably can't wait. And there was also a House of Commons Digital Skills and Careers report that said the digital skills gap alone is costing the UK economy 63 billion per year. So the lack of digital fluency, digital literacy, call it what you may. And again, the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report said that by 2030, so we like round numbers, 25% of jobs will be reshaped or removed. So I think like there is a burning platform for us as a profession. We like I don't think we can wait. You know, we need to enable people to use AI properly, and we need to do that through reskilling, retraining. Like say, a quarter of people who have had AI education or training, yet you know, only 36% of people say they've got the skills to use it appropriately. So that's a big gap. If people are using it and they don't know how to check it, or they're not using it. The other thing, like I say, I'll share the report that we did, because it was global report, 47 countries, a significant number of people were surveyed. How do you know as an organization that your your employees are using it ethically, responsibly, in a way that's kind of protecting your data? And again, KPMG have a view on that in terms of trust in AI, and very happy to share the report on how that can be more productive.
Yeah, the ethical side remains really important, doesn't it? Sort of front and center. But first of all, I want to thank Emily for a great question. But Louise, just to take a step out of this for a second, it's such a privilege to talk to somebody who's armed with all of this data and stats and the evidence. So I'm sure I can speak on behalf of everybody attending this, that this is, already really, really useful and great to see some facts behind it. Anne McAlevey has, sorry if I've not pronounced your name correctly, Anne, is asking, are digital skills more relevant than face-to-face skills now? I kind of think we've touched on that. I hope Louise would agree that really it's a combination of both, but with the ability to learn being paramount. So I'm gonna move us on slightly from that one. The LPI perspective on how organizations are adapting learning strategies, I think would resonate with you in that we've never seen so much change in how companies are looking to help people learn. What is interesting is there is this sort of movement for empowerment. I wrote an article a few weeks ago on a concept I was defining as learnership, where the idea that leaders should be learners. They're no longer omniscient presences. They are humble people who are willing to accept they don't know everything, but they are role models for learning. And there are countless examples of organizations who've done this really, really well. I could think off the top of my head of GlaxoSmithKline, who had the Next Gen Academy, with line managers being sort of learning evangelists, if you like. Are you seeing any big changes like that as we, look to address the skills gap with all of these different factors?
Yeah, I mean, learning has just got to be everybody's business, hasn't it? And again, I've been in this industry for more years than maybe I care to remember. But I remember, decades ago, somebody saying, well, why would you train people? Because if you train people and you educate them, what if they leave your organization? And then the counter that is, well, what if you don't train them and they don't learn and they stay? Like, that's got to be the worst, hasn't it? So I think, yeah, absolutely, leaders have to be more than role models, actually. If they're not learning, then their enterprise will not be being led as well as it could be.
Yeah, I agree. A brilliant comment from Jenny. She thinks that the real risk of AI isn't that it replaces humans, it's that humans slowly lose the skills that make them irreplaceable. Fantastic quote. Thank you for that, Jenny. So one of the things that I think you're pushing, and I applaud you for doing this and KPMG for doing this, is this idea of addressing the skills gap and lifelong learning, it being everybody's business. So it isn't just a business or a government issue. It isn't even just an L&D function issue. Heather McGowan famously wrote in her article a few years ago, she described lifelong learning as the ultimate pension for individuals. So the idea that you're keeping going, you're making yourself more and more employable, really. And then if we go back a slightly longer, Michelangelo said ancora imparo, always learning, and he was 87 when he said that. So this isn't a new idea. I'm not belittling KPMG or your move here. As I say, applaud it. But why is it now everybody's business? Do you think that's a reaction to the pandemic and AI, or is there something else making this happen?
Yeah, so fortunately, Michelangelo even predates me.
And me, yeah.
But I think there's two things there. The first is now. Why is it now? And then why is it everybody's business? So let me just try and cover some of those. So we know that lifelong learning enhances organizational, operational capability. But more than that, it supports social mobility, it supports employee retention, it supports employee engagement and employee well-being. So like fundamental, it's a tenet of good organizational performance. And every time that somebody makes a choice to learn, they're building their skills, they're investing in themselves, and this has a ripple effect on business, community, and the economy. And we've heard, many times things about kind of learning in the flow of work. I like to talk about learning in the flow of life, because actually, like, if you learn at work, you take that home. If you learn at home, you take it to work. We're all living at work as well as working at home. So I think that is really important. And yes, of course, governments, education and businesses need to work together. But actually, to your point about it's everybody's business. Like, it can't just be the CLO, it can't just be the CEO that's pushing lifelong learning. It's got to be exactly as you've said, the line managers, if they're evangelical, they're role modeling, but it's actually individuals themselves. And I often say to my team, I really care about your careers. Like, I passionately care about your careers, but nobody is quite as passionate about your career as you are. So it's got to be everybody's business. And if we can kind of instill that, and I noted it was obviously Get the Nation Learning Week last week, run by the Learning Work Institute. And their report said that actually, sadly, adult participation in learning is down this year. So it's only about 1 in 5, 21% of people are in work, are currently engaged in learning of any time. And I think last year it was circa 30%. So I've no idea why it's down. You have to hope that it's because people are focusing on other things, not that learning is being withdrawn.
It would be interesting to look at the data behind that, because what we're seeing at the LPI is the absolute opposite. We're seeing individuals and organizations really pushing people to develop themselves constantly. And perhaps it's because of the use of tools like generative AI tools, that might not be defined as learning in that report, but actually one could argue that done correctly, that obviously is learning. I mean, knowledge, as we keep saying at the LPI, knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. So ChatGPT is giving you the kind of information, and that contextualization can sometimes not be there. But so this idea that it's everybody's business, that means that it is organizations' business as well. It's employers' business, and it is the learning department's business. We're getting a few comments in chat here. Vanessa Alexandra is saying that she finds it challenging to even measure skills gaps at scale, which makes the interventions a bit more difficult to deliver where it's truly needed. Darren Guy is asking, relating to both process and culture, how can we build skills and measure their contextual application at scale? Do you have any comments to make on either of those, Louise? Any support that you can give?
So I guess, so one of the things that I think is interesting is, and we talk about this a lot, is that I think in the future, people are going to be deploying skills to task, not people to roles. And actually that skill, that capability might not come from a human. So actually, fundamentally, you have got to understand, and this is for me the exciting bit that I think is really exciting for L&D professionals, is that we can make that link between strategic workforce planning and the skills and capabilities that we've got. But the first thing, and I think it's Darren, I can't see all of the questions, is that you have got to know what skills you have got in your organisation. And in order to do that, and there's lots of tools and technology out there. KPMG have one, I'm sure other organisations do. You need to do your strategic workforce planning. You need to know what skills and capability you have. And to start off, you have to kind of sort out your taxonomy. You have to make sure everybody's speaking the same language, so that you can compare what you have got in your organization. What that will then enable you to do is to unpick some hidden strengths. So you will find people with skills and capabilities in your organization that you didn't know. And language speaking is one that we often see, that people, you know, I need somebody that speaks this particular language and it's always urgent and I don't know who's got that in my organization. So if you do that strategic workforce mapping and you map your skills and capabilities, you will know that and you will be able to access it. You can then enable all of that with technology. Like I say, there are lots of platforms out there and I think they're growing. And then I think that is really quite interesting is then think about how you reward the culture that you want. So if you're going to change the culture, you know, you need to reward people who act in the way that you want. So if you want more collaboration with AI and agentic workforce, if you want to make sure people are using AI properly, and I saw something in the chat earlier where somebody said, maybe we'll lose our human skills. Actually, we don't want people to lose our human skills. We want people to be able to have critical thinking, etc. So, you know, make sure that you're having the conversations with employees very explicitly, so that you're consciously, you know, mapping the skills and capabilities. And you know, if then there is a task that needs doing, and that can be done by agentic workforce, again, that you're consciously allocating that task to the agent, supported and supplemented by the human.
This is really interesting, Louise. So Alan has beat me to it as well in the chat. I was going to ask this. Udemy, I think, they do their annual learning report, and a couple of years ago, one of the things they predicted was we'll move to a gig economy within large employers based on skills. It might even be, I think this was more of their kind of provocative bit, might even be the end of job descriptions, right? Because we'll just move from different things to different things. That coupled with this idea that, you know, the Project Aristotle a few years ago from Google outlined that psychological safety was the #1 factor in successful teams. The bit that seems to be missing then, we want this gig economy with skills. We know that psychological safety is the most important factor in teams. Are you seeing companies give people the freedom to develop themselves? Is this really happening, or is this some sort of utopian ideal?
So I still think, like, let's be honest, where are we, 2025? You know, there are still a lot of organizations, particularly those that are heavily regulated, that, you know, like financial services or critical safety organizations, where, you know, they have a compliance that they have to show and demonstrate to regulators. You know, 100% understandably, you know, we all want that to be true. So I suspect that the reality isn't there, you know, particularly in those types of organizations. I mean, people like Google, you know, they've always been talking about, haven't they, about kind of, you know, you can learn kind of, you know, learning to learn is a great thing. Doesn't matter if you're kind of learning to play a guitar or learning, you know, to be an opera singer, actually you're still cognitively developing. And how you bring that in. So I suspect that the reality is not there yet. But equally, I think, you know, the pressures driving change, technology, actually employee expectations. So employee expectations themselves are that they have that more, what I'm going to call kind of consumer grade reality. You know, market cycles are shorter, talent is going to be more scarce. So maybe, you know, it might be a 2026, 2027, but I'm not seeing it ubiquitously. You know, I am seeing a lot of, you know, organizations that are still doing very specific skills training and learning in relation to, you know, their industry.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what Lee has put in chat as well, separating human skills and AI skills. Surprisingly, or maybe not to you actually, Louise, but even in this kind of AI-infused world that we live in, still always #1 or 2 as the top challenge for chief learning officers seems to be building a learning culture. Now, I would have thought AI I have 30 years in this industry, and AI seems to be the biggest thing to have ever happened to it, in that it could provide that speed to access of information, speed to access of knowledge, genuinely at the point of need. So we will probably have experienced computer-based training, e-learning, blended learning, all the different terminologies. And now we have this opportunity where we can really harness this. So how is KPMG supporting organizations to build learning cultures? And the caveat I would offer on that is, I don't believe it's possible to build a learning culture from top to bottom. I think permission can be given, but cultures tend to rise from the bottom to the top, don't they? So what can we do to engender this idea of a great learning culture with optimal employee engagement and people being super productive?
So I absolutely agree. What you want to be kind of thinking about is, how do you have a career that's underpinned by lifelong learning, and how do you develop that, exactly as you've said, as a culture in your organization? It's challenging because, again, organizations are thinking about the reality of what they need to do today with one mind on kind of what they want to do tomorrow, and where technology is at a pace that we're not quite sure how it's going to land. But AI is going to bring kind of increasing use of automation, absolutely. And what we need organizations is to create a culture, to your point about psychological safety, where employees can learn, they unlearn, they relearn, but it's got to be at pace and scale. And the only way I think that the workplace will enable this is through leadership. It's through leadership role modeling, it's through advocacy, it's making sure there is time and space. How many times do we hear, like, I would like to learn, but I just haven't got the time? There needs to be a learning mindset, like give that permission. And again, this is back to the point I was making earlier. You reward the culture that you want to remain. So, you create psychological safety, you create incentives and rewards. And by the way, like, they don't all have to be financial. So, rewards can be simple as, thank yous. So we have Viva Engage. We give praise for our employees. If somebody's done something well, and they're doing some learning, like, we can give praise. Everybody can see it at an organizational level. So, I'm not just saying that you've got to spend money. I'm conscious of the point, that there's lots of different size and scale of organizations. And opportunities for learning in the flow of life are endless. And it's not all about classroom learning, to the point, yeah, we do want face-to-face, but actually there are micro moments of learning in everybody's day, and we need to make learning an everyday objective that is both accessible and protected. Organizations that have a learning culture start meetings and end meetings like, what have we learned today, what do we need to learn, and at the end of the day, what do we need to learn tomorrow, and how do we enable that? And again, just going back to and maybe you could just put the slide back up. We did a workplace learning survey culture at the back end of last year, and we found that a third of employers are offering their employees regular opportunities to learn new skills. And only 40% of people said they had the right skills to do the jobs that they were doing right now. Most in-demand skills were digital skills, industry-specific skills, but also, and we call these soft skills, but we all know they're not soft, communication and leadership skills. So 41% of people were saying that they really felt the need for that. And really interestingly, this was one of these kind of surprising things that you find when you do surveys, was how long it was taking people to find what they wanted to learn. And 26% of respondents said it took more than 15 minutes or more to find what they wanted. And I don't know about you, Ed, but I probably not the greatest attention span if I'm looking for something and it's not.
What are you saying, Louise? What are you saying about me?
I'm off it. Just me then. Just me.
No, you're absolutely right.
So what we've done is we've created an agent called Spark, And we've embedded Spark in Teams. And this was something that I absolutely insisted on because, again, some KPMG research, we found that people are in Teams about once every 6 minutes in our organisation. But generally, people go into an LMS once every 6 months. Right. So we put Spark, which is a learning assistant or a learning coach, on Teams. It's an icon on the Teams toolbar. And our uptake has been absolutely phenomenal. So you can go in, you can ask Spark what you need to do, if you're doing goals, what learning is available. And again, like directly as a consequence of, people telling us that if they don't find learning quickly, then they check out. So you just need to make it really, really easy for people to find the content that they need. If it's not immediately available, they either go elsewhere or they give up. And they might go elsewhere, and that go elsewhere might be AI, but they might not have fact-checked it. Or I guess the worst would be that they actually give up. And hopefully I'm just saying something that people agree with, but you must provide a flexible mix of delivery. Different enterprises, we're all kind of connected today to the screen, but there are lots of frontline workers who don't spend their lives, connected to screens. They're, interacting with people, they may be supporting our highways, our hospitals, our schools, our retail. So, you need to think about different modalities as well. So, a one size fits all will never kind of promote a culture of
great. That's a great ending line there as well. Is Spark something that, where does Spark go in terms of information? Does it go beyond KPMG, or does it limit itself to KPMG's, information world?
Yeah. So at the moment, we are just using it to look inside KPMG. For our clients, again, we're looking in their own SharePoints, but what it means is that it can look across your enterprise. So on the SharePoints, on the file sites, on different repositories, and it can actually connect all of the learning that's maybe being created off the kind of from the purview of the chief learning officer in the past, and it brings it all into one place. And that's made us really consolidate the learning that we've got everywhere, but also recognize that different people will learn in different ways, therefore we have to have good access.
Yeah, it sounds great. I know that it's that contextualizing, isn't it, of all of that content. There are probably 80% of the people on this call, I would imagine, will have bought an LXP in their lifetime that nobody's using because it's not quite right contextually, and they didn't work on employee engagement within the company to get people to use that. Yeah, I think Anna Spark is an agent, and obviously LPI has to be vendor agnostic. There are other ones available, but it would be great to find out more about Spark. Anna has asked for more information. Emily Peterson, you'll get a copy of this chat, Louise, and send information, of course, or one of your people can. Worth looking at other things like Joggle and Abodu, similar tools. And I think what you've identified there, Louise, is a trend. We're certainly seeing this, is one of the biggest or most common questions we get asked at the LPI from CLOs is, look, we've spent loads of money on this LXP or LMS and nobody's using it. And I think AI is the answer to that. And AI is the bridge to create a learning culture. I really think with Spark, you've maybe bridged the gap as well between convenience and efficacy, which has been somewhat paradoxical over the last few years, in that we've all been driving towards whatever does everything faster, but it hasn't worked. I would also say, we talked about Google DeepMind CEO's comments earlier about learning to learn being the most important skill. And yet you've got this paradox again of people saying they don't have time. So for me to try and summarize some of the points you've made before we go on to the next section here, it looks like skills taxonomies are really important as a kind of foundation in capturing that data. You've got the lights back. Excellent. It looks like data... It looks like data is essential. Giving people permission to learn and time to learn, that psychological safety, is really important. you're telling us that leaders role modeling learning and that concept of learnership that I think we're both passionate about is also going to help with that permission. And then at the end of that, of course, we do have to see if this is working, and we've got to measure that. So I do think we've covered how organizations can embed learning into everyday work. Let's just take a look at chat. Jenna's saying, how does Spark discern between up-to-date, accurate documents and content across the enterprise and out-of-date or archived content? Is it possible it can do that?
Yeah, so our learning tech team, there was a manual job before we went live. So effectively, we archived the out-of-date content and Spark doesn't see it. And of course, Spark does learn. But yeah, it is. It was an interesting, I think Ian Barnwell will say, an interesting task.
It's interesting in inverted commas, I think, there, reading between the lines. Okay, I'm going to ask you more of a question about you, Louise, if that's okay. And we ask this question of pretty much everybody that attends these LinkedIn Live fireside chats. And once again, by the way, thank you for sharing all of this great data and your insights. We're talking about how individuals can take ownership of their own skills journeys. So can you tell us, when did you personally last consciously learn something new, maybe that changed the way you work, and how did you learn it?
So every day is a school day. You learn, so those kind of micro moments. And I guess the thing that I'm working on the most, and actually this is not necessarily new, and it's related to something that you were saying earlier, Ed, is but it had such a fundamental shift in kind of how I was doing, is we did some internal learning based on psychological safety, and that made me get the book, the Amy Edmondson Fearless Organization book, and I knew intuitively that psychological safety was the good thing. Like, I've got a coaching leadership style. Hopefully people would say I'm an inclusive leader. What I hadn't realised was the unintended consequences of not having psychological safety, particularly in relation to things like dangerous silence. So where if you're an individual and you might have like the very best idea, and it could lead to growth, it could lead to massive innovation, but you're not sure whether or not like your idea will be shot down if you don't have psychological safety in your organization. Therefore, there is absolutely no consequence to you as an individual if you say nothing.
Right.
So therefore, the innovation and creativity that we're all missing as an unintended consequence if you don't have psychological safety. And I raise this because it's something I'm checking all of the time. And I do a lot of work with my SLT on psychological safety, and they do with their teams and team leaders. But I think a lack of innovation is what will stifle organisations' growth back to where we started a while ago. And so I just would say, just like check that you actually have got the psychological safety that you think you've got. And, when was the last time, a junior colleague really surprised you with a really great idea, and you kind of like, it knocks you for six, and you're just like, wow, I wouldn't have thought of that. Now, it happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully it's not just because I don't have any great ideas, but it's because I ask for it. And I'm really, really open. And as you say, I'm a senior partner at KPMG, so I have to say when I don't know things. So I say I don't know, and that will mean that then people, there isn't a dangerous silence. So for me, like say, that's something I learned. I actually did it. It was a face-to-face learning event. We had to be blindfolded, and we had to lead people round cones to try and see how trusting we were, because actually trust is really fundamental. But that like say sparked my curiosity. I got Amy's book, I read it, I reread it. Like it's my kind of, I think about it, and I'm questioning myself and my team all of the time. But what are the litmus indicators we've got that we are doing as good a job as we think we are doing?
And the book was Amy Edmondson, The Fearless Organization.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. Perhaps I think it's Giles who's moderating. If we can find that book and pop it in chat, that would be really great. Certainly, it's on my list now. Thank you for sharing that. It makes me think that, you know, the willingness to learn as well is incumbent on the individual, isn't it? So we talked about structuring companies, and we'll come on to measurement in a second. A reminder to everybody as well who's listening, you know, we're approaching the last 10 minutes. Pop your questions in chat. Louise does have a full-time job that she has to do at some point, and we've grabbed her for this hour. So somebody said to me the other day that curiosity is the last competitive advantage in a technology-driven world. And it's really stayed with me that how can you sort of engender curiosity then? You've talked really articulately and eloquently about, you know, how organizations can create psychologically safe environments, but do we encourage curiosity, or are we trying to put people into boxes still, so that they're manageable?
That's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, curiosity for sure is essential, but I don't think it's the only competitive advantage. I also think, I speak hopefully passionately about the fact that we need to, and again, other people have put in the chat, really protect and grow our unique human skills. Now, they might be critical thinking, they're also creativity, it's leadership, it's management. And particularly, you know, where we're dealing with ambiguity, we have to be authentic, we have to be vulnerable, we have to be empathetic. And all of those things, there's things that, at least at the moment anyway, the agents aren't doing. So, but we also have to have that openness, our enthusiasm, and our agility to learn. I mentioned trust being paramount in relation to psychological safety. But curiosity also needs courage as a kind of a companion as well. Courage to test, courage to measure, and courage to learn, and courage to fail. So, so I think just being curious on its own is probably not quite enough. And yeah, like we definitely do need to be curious, but probably just not in isolation.
Yeah, I don't think curiosity killed the ChatGPT, did it? But it's curiosity instead, I think, is almost furthering that. But it's a ground level, I agree. It's the beginning, it's a foundation, and you can work with that. If a company can trust its employees and they feel that they can be curious, you've got a kind of magic equation there to build something using technology, using people, and all the encouragement that you've identified. There's a few great comments in chat. Learning from mistakes is a significant part of learning, but it definitely requires a psychologically safe environment. People agreeing with you about the book. Emily's saying that she thinks it's really important for innovation, curiosity, that is.
Yeah.
In terms of, so this is all great. Let's imagine that we're in a company that does all of these things incredibly well. C-suite, which, you know, you are in or have direct access to on a regular basis, will be saying, but did it work? And they will want some sort of measurement of this. Otherwise, and I'm speaking as somebody who's been in L&D for 30 years, L&D will still be this poor relation, a cost center, along with marketing, first thing to get cut in financially difficult times. So how can we create or evidence or measure impact of all of these amazing initiatives, Spark, role modeling from leaders, psychologically safe environments? How do you measure it?
So, so a couple of things. So really importantly, you have to have your baseline. So often what I find is that people say they want to measure some impact, but they don't know where they started. So it's really, really important to kind of set a baseline. I know it seems like, you know, motherhood and apple pie, but if you don't know where you started, you haven't got hope. It is difficult, you know, you can use proxies. So lots of organizations have kind of staff engagement surveys. So you can also look at kind of staff engagement, you can look at retention. But fundamentally, and somebody that talks about this and really thinks about this far more deeply than I do is Dr. Philippa Hardman. So she's
Yes.
talking a lot about evaluation. You know, if you're going to have a theory of change, again, set it up from the beginning, and I think it's an open conversation with your C-suite that if you're going to do it properly, like, you need the investment. So again, to set your baseline and to monitor something over a duration, it requires it requires investment. You know, dependent on the scale of your of what you're doing, it may or may not be, you know, a phenomenal amount, but you do need to protect that time, and you do need to be intentional about it. So, you know, if you want to find out, you know, if you're improving, you know, some kind of skill that you're putting into your organization, you better, like, say, know what level you are now, and you better know kind of where you need to be, like what would good look like. So again, so that you've got the so you've got that data, and then, you know, there are lots of different ways that you can evaluate, but probably don't just ask, you know, the kind of, don't just do the happy sheet, because, you know, that just generally tells you, you know, how much, you know, learners have liked what they've done. And, you know, that is really important, because obviously, you know, we don't want to be delivering learning that people don't like, but sometimes people don't like things because you know, they don't want to do it, or somebody's told them they've got to do it, and it's actually, you know, like, not that they don't actually like it, they've just, them line managers told them they've got to do it because they're not particularly good at it. So it's not always a very good barometer, but definitely you know, make it intentional, make it very specific, and always start off with your strategy early doors, and if you can get funding for it, all the better.
Yeah, fascinating, Louise. Thank you. I think, yeah, I agree. The idea of measurement doesn't start at the end of a learning experience, it's before the learning experience. You have to set up those, yeah, those tunnels, if you like. And great to hear Philippa's name mentioned. Massive fan of hers. I don't know whether you'd be aware personally, but we run two conferences, Learning Live in September and Learning Live AI is in June. And it's the first year we did it was this year, and it was insane how popular that event was. So we will definitely be running it again in the summer of next year. And I hope people like Philippa can join us, and obviously yourself as well, Louise. Stuart Brooks, fellow of the LPI, has asked, how does KPMG keep on top of the skills that they may not even know yet that they need to prioritize next? So almost future proofing within KPMG. I'm going to put you on the spot with that one before I ask you a final question.
So we're kind of, I guess, blessed in that, you know, across our organization, you know, we have a lot of very deep thinkers who it's their job to be thinking about kind of what we will or won't know, and they might be really specific in something like indirect tax. They might be something on you know, kind of HR. They might be something on some FS. So we, you know, encourage people, and again, it's in our DNA that we are that we're curious and that we are, like, thinking about. So it's something we value. So because we value it, you know, people know that they kind of, that they have that kind of permission, they have the psychological safety, and we have people whose job it is to just be thinking about that. So yeah, I know that we're blessed.
Very lucky, yeah, but a great organization. We're doing a lot with you guys right now, and a really good role model as a company for learning culture too. So thank you for the kind words about our conference in September in chat as well. So back to you personally as we wrap up, Louise. Where does the partner, head of learning services and global solution lead for learning go to learn themselves? What's your preferred mode? Are you a podcast person? Do you, obviously you read Amy Edmondson's book that you mentioned, but how do you learn?
Yeah, so again, one of the things that I'm really trying to do, so I'm very analytical and I do love to read, but I recognised that I wasn't doing so well in terms of audio. So this year I'm definitely doing more podcasts. And actually, I was also at Learning Live, and I did download the Peak Performance app. So I'm listening to that. You know, again, our chair, Bina Mehta, who's a phenomenal lady, she does Pull Up a Chair podcasts. So I listen to those. I also and maybe this has come across, I'm a talker, so I talk to people, I talk to my colleagues, and I listen. But I'm definitely in the micro learning. Of course, you know, I have a really good suite of learning that's also available to me as a partner, so I access that as well. And again, I role model it, I put it in my diary. You know, all my team can see my diary, so they can see very openly when I'm doing face-to-face dedicated learning. But I also put time in my diary, and again, very explicitly, that I'm putting in time to think and learn. So, you know, on a Wednesday afternoon, there's a slot in my diary. If somebody's looking to put some time in there with me, they're like, oh, Louise is thinking and she's learning at this time. So I need to find another time. And that's obviously in addition to the focus time that, you know, Microsoft also kindly puts in my diary. So yeah, so I am curious, and I learn in lots of different ways, and I think that's where the kind of, you know, the learning in the flow of life came from, where I you know, realized that, you know, that is, you know, I'm learning to go on a stand-up paddleboard at the moment, and you know, so I'm also trying to do something very different.
How's that going? Because I find that a nightmare.
Yeah, it's not doing so great now. It's got cold. I probably am going to be a fair weather paddleboarder, but I am trying.
You and me both. Okay, well, we'll take one final question, which is from Catherine Chapman, which kind of feeds on poetically from what you were just saying about yourself there. Do you invest, I think talking about KPMG, does KPMG invest in upskilling at the top of the organization to create this idea of an expert user group and cascade down, or do you build up competency from the bottom through exploration and practice whilst maintaining those ethical standards and productivity? I think I know the answer to this, but
sorry, Catherine, it is going to be both.
Yeah, I thought it would be. Yeah,
you have to do both simultaneously. I think, you know, it would be quite risky to just think that, you know, you upskill at the top and you hope it permeates down. You have to do both. You know, that bottom up kind of pushing is you know, very, very important as well.
It's been a genuine privilege to chat with you. I was fortunate enough to chat for a few minutes before we started this as well, and I'm a big fan of what you're talking about, Louise. Congratulations on the great work you're doing at KPMG. Thanks so much for sharing so much valuable information here, your views, but also the data and the stats that's going to really help everybody. Anybody that's in this call, I think on the LinkedIn comments within the post for the original session here today, we'll post a link to the book, and we'll post, if we can, with Louise's permission, maybe the statistics. If it has to be done privately, we'll distribute that to you via email, but we'll get that to you somehow.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get the reports.
That would be amazing. Okay, thank you, Louise. Well, not only are you a fantastically informative guest on the show, but your timing is impeccable as we hit 59 minutes and 20 seconds, whilst also being in the dark for, not metaphorically speaking, but literally speaking. Jenna says, thank you. Absolutely brilliant session, along with others saying exactly the same. Anne McAlevey says, thank you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. But most importantly, thank you, Louise. Super interesting session. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. We'll see you at the next one with GP Strategies next week. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.